Hello all. In this sort of series of mine of exploring politicians and those in power who are deciding our fate in some respects, I think it's important to highlight those who have extraordinary power, yet many people may not be altogether familiar with what that power is that they have. People who have been marked out for significant global roles that are not for the betterment of people, in my opinion. Politicians who are part of the globalist agenda, who are tailor-made for a new digital ID and cashless society, and who have been pushed forward into these significant roles for no apparent reason. These are globalists. First, let me explain what I mean when I say globalist. I shall use the Cambridge Dictionary definition. This is someone who believes that economic and foreign policy should be planned in an international way rather than according to what is best for one particular country. The politicians who are globalists, which is almost certainly the vast majority of them, do not place us, the British electorate, first in their priorities. This, of course, applies to other countries and the globalists that are leading them, such as Justin Trudeau or Joe Biden. Globalist politicians see us all working in lockstep, and that includes on issues like mandatory jabs, lockdowns, and the LGBTQ agenda. All of them in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If you're not familiar with them, I urge you to look them up because it may suddenly illuminate so much of what is going on. So, the first globalist politician I've chosen is Penny Mordaunt. Mordaunt is a Tory MP. She's the leader of the House of Commons, and she also worked for George W. Bush during his presidential campaign. Now, she may first of all have come to your attention via her pushing of the LGBTQ agenda, or it may have been at King Charles, the coronation. You may have seen her walking with Charles, carrying the sword of state. And this is because she is also the Lord President of the Privy Council. So straight away, you can see this is someone who is spread very thin over a number of important offices. Now, she's had that role with the Privy Council since September 2022, and she's heavily involved in royal proceedings, and so that was why she carried that 17th century sword of state into Westminster Abbey as part of the coronation process. The sword was made originally for George VI's coronation in 1821 and symbolises royal power and the monarch accepting his duty as a ruler. I'm trying not to say that without vomiting at this moment in time, because if anybody knows anything about me, I'm completely opposed to that sort of stuff. Ms. Mordaunt first came to my attention when she used important parliamentary time to wage a bet where she had to say a four-letter word which derives from cockerel as many times as she could, and this was a bet that she had set with sort of her bawdy friends. So she did that during parliamentary time. Imagine that. She did that during a time of austerity when people are having to use an obscene amount of food banks. And this woman thought it would be hilarious for her friends in Portsmouth, the sort of naval area, to do this. So that should already give you an idea of who she is. And before I go into she actually confessed doing that when she was receiving an award at the Spectator magazine's Parliamentarian of the Year award at London's Savoy Theatre. And her prize was actually for a speech that she'd done earlier that year, during which time she had also very naughtily used words regarding male and female anatomy. I'm being very careful what I say here, obviously, because of the platform that I'm using. Explaining how it came about, she said, and I quote, "Some of my Marine training officers at Dartmouth thought it would be a good idea to break my ladylike persona by getting me to yell particular rude words during the most grueling part of our training. But she was fined for a misdemeanor, and the fine was to say a particular word, an abbreviation, as I say, of Cockerell several times during a speech on the floor of the Commons, and also mention the name of all the officers present. So this woman thinks that she can use parliamentary time just to satisfy her mates, right? So already should be given a measure of who she is, that her constituents and the problems her constituents may be facing aren't necessarily the priority. Of course, she would deny that, but we are entitled to our opinions, aren't we? So let me just give you a rundown to give you some background of who she is. She's the daughter of a former paratrooper. Her mother was related to Philip Snowdon, the first Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer. She was the first female Defence Secretary. She also became the first ever Minister of State for the Armed Forces in May 2015. She was once voted Britain's sexiest MP, and she was also that most horrible of politicians, desperate to be a celebrity, and she featured in an ITV programme called Splash. And I absolutely loathe that. You know what they say, don't you, about politicians, that it is showbiz for ugly people. Now, I'm not describing her for a second as ugly, at least not externally. Anyway, onwards. She is, of course, a WEFer. She attended the 2019 World Economic Forum in Davos. The theme of the event was Globalization 4.0, shaping a global architecture in the age of the fourth industrial revolution. Since then, she has worked with the WEF on several occasions. She was also the Minister for Women and Equalities, and that was also when she jumped up and came once again to my attention, because it was noted that some of her policies were far from women and inequalities. One of the things, so she got heavily involved in the trans debate, and she was someone who repeated the mantra, trans women are women, trans men are men. This, I suspect, was in part because her twin brother, James, is gay, very much part of the LGBTQ promotion. Mordaunt was a big advocate for self-ID, and which is extremely dangerous and detrimental primarily to women and children. So this is not somebody that I would trust to be looking after my rights in any way, shape or form. When she went up for the leadership of the Conservative Party, she then rode back on that because she realised that saying men could become women and women could become men was, shockingly, an unpopular stance amongst people outside of her LGBTQ echo chamber. She has another brother, Ed, and he avoided jail last year after admitting sending indecent images to a police officer who was posing as a 14-year-old girl. Now, she has significant ties. Take her relationship with Bill Gates, which she has been keen to play down, claiming he has no significant power amongst politicians. Of course he doesn't, which is why he's able to summon meetings with prime ministers and leaders of the opposition. She first met Bill Gates in her role in international development as the UK governor to the World Bank. And she, along with him, promoted huge overseas aids and an immunisation programme. A press release that was released from her department at the time in 2018 said, as a result of UK lobbying, the World Bank Group has committed to focus significantly more of its resources on poorer countries, increasing from 63% to 70% by 2030, while ensuring richer countries will pay more to borrow. The UK is to commit more money, $547 million approximately over 5 years to the World Bank, alongside a wider package of agreed reforms. These will include the World Bank Group making efficiency savings of $1.8 billion by 2030 through pay restraints. Note, 2030 is repeated twice there, and that's for a very, very good reason, because 2030 is the target date for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, because she is part of that agenda, being a globalist. Okay, so that is important to say. And a direct quote from her regarding this is it is in all of our interest to make sure the World Bank Group is in the right shape to tackle the global challenges of today and of the future. This crucial landmark agreement between the bank and the international community will increase lending to some of the poorest countries in the world to deliver better, sustainable health provision, education and jobs to those who need them most. Well, you know as well as I do, that's an awful lot of words that won't actually add up to people in need getting the help that they need. Okay, this again is the globalist agenda. And as I say, she's been very keen to kind of play down her relationship with Bill Gates. Bill Gates wrote a glowing foreword in her actual book. So that suggests to me someone who is rather close. Her book, by the way, was full of praise for China. It just had this kind of relentless promotion of the LGBTQ plus agenda. She thinks that more hate speech should be censored. And, it just kind of smacked of Marxism, really, nothing to do with conservatism, which was interesting. She appeared on Dan Wootton's show. Don't even get me started on him, but I have made a video about Dan Wootton and the extensive allegations about him, and those are available on my channel. And she appeared on his show, and she said in regard to Bill Gates, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but by and large, the world is a better place for having had Bill Gates in it. Really? For real? The extraordinary thing about Penny Mordaunt is she is an unimpressive politician who has risen to extraordinary heights, and you have to wonder why. For me personally, I think you can tell a lot about a politician by their voting record. Let's just have a look at some of the things that she has voted for and against. So she voted against taxing the rich. It actually shows that she's very pro-military force, having consistently voted for use of UK military forces in combat operations overseas. She has voted against integration, against the right to remain for EU nationals already living in the UK, against raising welfare benefits to align with rising prices. She has been against higher benefits for those unable to work due to illness or disability. Of course, typical Tory, let's give the sick and disabled a good kicking because after all, they got nothing else to worry about, eh? And she's voted in favour of mass surveillance of people's communications and activities. So again, she fully deserves to be the first globalist in Parliament that I'm looking at here. And even though she failed in her bid to become leader of the party, she actually ran against the current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in 2022 and finished in third place before backing Liz Truss and earning a place in Liz Truss' very short-lived government. The fact is, Penny Mordaunt has been given a position on the world stage by her handlers. It's really that simple. As I say, she's an underwhelming member of Parliament. She supports all of the policies that is about keeping people down and creating a several-tiered society. So yes, Penny Mordaunt is a globalist through and through. She absolutely deserves to be highlighted as one. And please feel free to suggest members of Parliament in any country that you feel deserve to be looked at as a globalist. Because the thing about globalists, as far as I'm concerned, is they're not looking after you, the electorate. They are looking after the much bigger, wider concerns of their mates, their elite mates. They are not for us, they are for them. Just to say, I have a Patreon now. Details in the description. There's 3 tiers. I'm planning to launch a show which will be available on Patreon and thereafter available to the public. However, once a month there will be a behind the scenes video and that will be exclusive to my Patreon. Thank you very much for all of your support. Always appreciated. Take care.